All right, Sal. So February 2002, Adam Vinatieri, after previously making a couple weeks earlier the greatest kick in Patriots history in the snow against the Raiders, and then he made it again to win. And then he makes the winning kick in Super Bowl 36 and goes down as an icon. 21 years later, my guy Chad Ryland comes in. It's 10-7, Giants, 35-yarder to send the game into an overtime nobody wanted. And Chad said, you know what? I'm going to hook this one left. Sends it left, puts the Pats into the top 2 with an outside chance to get the first pick in the 2023 draft. They are probably not going to win another game this season. I would say it's a safe bet. I don't know if FanDuel has odds on it, but they're going to be prohibitive underdogs, I think, in all of the games except for the Jets game. They play home Chargers next week, at Pittsburgh, home KC, at Denver, at Buffalo, and then home against the Jets the last week where Aaron Rodgers, he's ever coming back. But this was both the nadir and the apex of the 2023 season, Sal, because we needed the loss. It's a weird situation against your team. I know you hated it.
I do hate it. I do, because this is a rivalry. Giants, Patriots is a rivalry. You should never root for the other team. You should never be rooting for Tommy DeVito on the other side to put you out of your misery and vault you up these. I don't know what kind of chart you like. You even know who you're going to draft. Like, oh, Marvin Harrison Jr. All right, Marvin Harrison. There could be 3 receivers down in the bottom half of the first round that are as good as Marvin Harrison Jr. You just don't know it yet. And you've made your decision. You're not going to root for Bill Belichick to break the record as a Patriot. A guy who's done so much for you and everything else, you're now rooting for losses. That's what I don't like.
Well, I think he's also rooting for losses because what other explanation was there to play Mac Jones?
No way.
Belichick did the classic. He split the snaps with the guy all week. He left everybody in the dark for who the starter was going to be. He made it as tenuous as possible for Mac. He did everything possible to completely undermine his confidence. And guess what happened? Mac, who was already a shell of himself, went out and played his worst game yet, which didn't seem possible.
You said Zappy's worse. You said it on text. You like Zappy might be worse. So his hands are tied. Like, I don't know what he's not trying to lose. That kicker's not trying to lose. It's a fun joke to make. Like, oh, Kraft was on the phone. He made it. He put in the call, and that's it. Kicker missed by 3 feet. He didn't hook it. Into the right corner of the end zone.
It's a glorious 3 feet. I actually think you could argue, I don't know how bad Malik Cunningham is, but at least he can run around. One of the things that's crazy about the Pats QB situation, like these guys combined today, they were 12 for 21 for 89 yards. They threw 3 picks and no touchdowns. Mm-hmm. And they had 0 rushes. So not only are they terrible pocket passers, but you don't have to worry about, like, even PJ Walker, who's terrible, right? But at least with PJ Walker, it's like, oh, he might run for a first down. You at least, like, there's some linebacker who's like, we got to worry about this guy a little bit. The Pats, they have terrible quarterbacks who are also slow and clumsy. So you don't even have to worry about anything other than them just throwing the ball to you. The Giants got 10 first downs and they won. The Pats defense, which lost Judon and Gonzalez and has allowed 40 points in the last 3 weeks combined, all losses. And this is the darkest Patriot season in 31 years. So.
And you should feel nothing but pity for Bill Belichick, and God forbid, let him scratch out a win or two, root for him in these close games. He'd do it for Bill. Both Bills, you and Belichick. I don't see any other way to root for this.
All right, but here's the counter with the Belichick thing, who brought us 6 Super Bowls, and I love the man. He did pick all of these players. It's not like there was another GM or another, like, he's trying to do all these jobs at once, which made a lot more sense when he was in his 50s and maybe even in his early 60s. But now he's in his 70s, still trying to do it. And they've just whiffed on these drafts in dramatic ways. And on top of it, taking guys that actually seem pretty promising. Like, I'm sorry, Mac was pretty good 2 years ago. Like he was the signs of something. He played really good games. I think 2 years ago, this weekend, they beat Tennessee, and Tennessee was the 1 seed in the AFC. And Mac he threw for like 300 yards and had a really good game and just looked like crisp and like a game manager. And 2 years later, he looks like he's Private Pile in Full Metal Jacket. So at some point, like developing a QB and having the right coaching staff, that's part of Belichick. But we don't.
Don't get me wrong. I love it. I love every minute of it. And I'm rooting against them, but you should root for them. That's all I'm saying.
I'm supposed to root for wins? Why? I want to get a quarterback. So Ceruti watches even more college football than you, Sal. Or maybe it's a dead heat. I don't know. Right. It might be a tie.
That's fine. He could take the title. Yeah.
I'm going to sit out this quarterback thing because I have not watched enough quarterback stuff in the draft. But there's Caleb Williams, who everyone was saying after his sophomore year looked like the next Mahomes. And then there's Drake May, and everybody was like, no, he's the stealth franchise guy. Watch out for him. So, Ceruti, we are now in the end of November. Are either of these guys slam dunks? Like, where do you have them? Who would you compare them to?
I mean, Russillo always talks about this. Like, the problem with Caleb is he was so good last year. He obviously won the Heisman. That like the expectations are so high, and the USC team, like the defense is as bad as there is in the entire country. So he's constantly having to throw for like 5 touchdowns and 400 yards a game, and that's an impossible thing to do. So of course, as he makes mistakes, it's not looking as fun as it was last year. So he's getting knocked down a peg. Plus, he had this thing where he was crying with his mom in the stands after the Washington loss. Then he was talking about after a game one time that he wanted to go home and cuddle with his dog. So he's really going to test like the hard.
That's very New England. It's very New England. I like that.
Yeah, they'll love him there. He's going to really test like the meathead hardo like draft guys of whether or not like, hey, is this guy an actual NFL quarterback? Or is he like the guy you want to lead your franchise?
Do you want to toss him the car keys? All that stuff?
Yeah. Is are guys going to is he going to get galvanized guys? I don't really get worried about that stuff. I mean, Drake May has definitely risen in a lot of. I mean, he goes 1 to the Bears in a lot of mocks now, and that was certainly before the season. It was all Caleb, so it's definitely a conversation for sure. At least with the mock draft expert guys.
But Ceruti, did you like Bryce Young last year? Did you think Mac Jones was a good pick? Did you think he was a top 4 guy 3 years ago? Like this, you got to get so lucky with this. You hit like 34%.
Definitely
the great draft guys.
There's actually like even if you go beyond Caleb Williams and Drake, there's Jaden Daniels he might win the Heisman. He's unreal at LSU this year, putting up legit video game stats. Bo Nix kind of looks like, not to make the Oregon comparison, he's like a poor man's Justin Herbert. He's physically pretty impressive. You got McCarthy at Michigan, Michael Penix, Shedeur Sanders. Like, there's a lot of like actually kind of even if you don't get one of the top 2, there's a few guys maybe the Pats can get later in the first or early in the second round. But I want to throw something at you though, guys, and specifically you, Bill, because they sit I think 3rd right now in the draft order. So and there's a lot of mocks.
No, I think they're 2nd now.
2nd or 3rd, I forget. I'm looking right now.
I know they're 2nd now.
So 2nd, either way. So if they end up getting Caleb, or say they get Drake May, who knows? Is there like a comp to like the Greg Popovich getting Wemby, like Belichick getting one of these young quarterbacks? Is that like a thing? Or are we just completely soured on Belichick to the point where he has to go if there's a new quarterback?
So on one of my Pats Twitter things that I follow, they retweeted somebody who said this in May after the Spurs got Wemby. And they were like, now watch the Pats try to do this with Caleb Williams. I guess Sal makes the key point. And I know Russillo's done a lot of stuff on this on his pod about what a coin toss this is. And I remember even writing about this at Grantland. I don't think it's ever changed. Like, it used to be 50% if it's like a top 6 quarterback. And now it feels like it's around 35 to 40. So you spend all this time hoping you land somebody, but then it's situation. Is his offensive line. It's like what happened with Bryce Young. Like, if you put Bryce Young in Houston and CJ Stroud in Carolina, I have no idea what the sliding doors thing would be. I guess my thing, Sal, is Belichick's history, everything we've learned from the guy since he took over with the Pats would indicate that he would get this pick and try to turn it into as much value as possible and trade backwards and try to get all of these different things. Like, it would be like his dream situation. It's like, oh, I turned this into 7 assets. But the Pats fans are sitting here going, you're batting 10% on your last like 6 drafts. Like, please don't get more draft picks. Just take the guy. So where do you stand on all this, Sal?
Here's where I stand. I watched a lot of college football this weekend, and I see a lot of guys, JJ McCarthy, Drake May, all these guys are good decision makers. And I know that's not going to translate in the pros, and it's depressing. It's like, I know this guy's going to suck on Atlanta or whatever. I could feel it in my bones. Bryce Young was a good decision maker, right? He was a good, I don't want to say game manager, but he was a good technician. Bo Nix is like throwing for 80%, right? It's insane. And he's nifty, getting out of the pocket and getting out of trouble. But it's not going to translate. So your eyes end up playing tricks on you. And I don't know. I have a couple of my favorites. I like Bo Nix and I like McCarthy and I like Drake May. But I don't know that those guys are going to be good, or one or two or three of them are going to be good.
Here's the thing: half those guys too, they've got better weapons in college than some of the than the Pats do.
Right.
Like Drake May. Certainly Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, probably. Maybe even Caleb. Like they just have better weapons than the Pats do right now. So if you put like those guys in this exact Pats offense, they're gonna struggle.
Well, and then you think Minshew is 6-5 with the Colts right now, right? And over again, like the Lions were able to turn their fortunes around by making that Stafford trade and putting Goff behind like what seemed on paper to be a really good offensive line. It wasn't good last Thursday, but sometimes I wonder, does it just make the most sense? Just take every year there's one incredible left tackle, just take that guy and then just keep building around your lines. And then eventually you're going to be able to grab one of these either disgraced quarterbacks who failed another team or some middling quarterback or whatever, and you might be better off because there's only 32 team league. There's only like 5 guys who actually make a difference. If none of these guys in the draft are going to be one of those 5 guys, then take Marvin Harrison or the left tackle. That'd be my take.
How far would you drop in the draft to take Gardner Minshew? If you could have Gardner Minshew on the team next year.
Well, like a Brock Purdy, right? That's your best case scenario for like, I didn't have to waste a high first round. I think it's so complicated and so hard to figure out. I can't believe we're not better at it. I know I talked about this a few weeks ago, but I just like in basketball, almost all the time it makes sense to me, right? Like even you watch like somebody like Franz on Orlando, and I'm sure the Warriors are like kicking themselves. I brought up Franz to make Ceruti happy.
Appreciate that.
But like Franz, the stuff he did in college, like you could see if it was the right type of team that took advantage of the things he was good at, it would make sense that he would become a good pro. Halliburton was like, the advanced stat people, like they loved him. They were like, here's the great thing. He doesn't need to have the ball a lot. He's putting up huge stats. Very rarely do we have like shocking NBA success stories. But in the NFL, like the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young thing to me, that everyone argued about that for 3 months?
Yeah.
And then you watch CJ Stroud today. I know they lost, but the guy's got so much poise. There was times in that game where Jacksonville was coming at him that whole game and he was escaping and stopping and just taking the extra 2 seconds. You're like, man, this guy has it. There's no question. Well, but why didn't we know that in April?
Well, remember, there was this like Ohio State quarterback thing where people were saying, is the system what they do in Ohio State? Like, is that just those guys weren't translating to the pros? It was like 3 or 4 different guys. And so I think that kind of knocked him. Plus, they've had awesome they've had like 2 wide receivers drafted in the first round, I think, for the last like 2 years. They're going to have another one this year. So it's like, is it the system? Is it the weapons? Or is it the quarterback? So that was the question, I think, around. I mean, everybody, I think, before the draft said Stroud was the one that threw the best ball. It was just, is he the system and the weapons, or is it all him? And it's probably a little bit of both.
It's like Henry Winkler, Simmons. Like he got typecast for being Fonzie and couldn't get a job after that. That's sort of what happens to these Ohio State guys. Like, yeah, all right, but you had all these receivers and everything, and I don't care that you
had Anson Williams, Donnie Most,
right. Yeah,
you had Pat Morita.
48 points against Georgia. You had Big Al breathing down your neck, so it didn't matter. But
did you guys think Burrow was a slam dunk when he was coming out? Because he had like the greatest college year in the history of college football, but was he considered a slam dunk?
He was so poised and all those things you talked about. But it was really just that senior year, though, right, Ceruti?
Yeah, I mean, he was an Ohio State quarterback that transferred out and went to LSU, so he found a home there, and that was arguably the most talented team. Van Lathan would tell you that's the best team in the history of college football he played on. So it was not people like Burrow's moxie, like the guy is just, you just love that guy when you spend probably 2 seconds with him. He's just a dude. But no, he was not a slam dunk. I think people thought Trevor Lawrence was more of a slam dunk than Burrow was, for sure.
Yeah. But Drake May and Caleb Williams are not on the Trevor Lawrence slam dunk level. It does not seem.
I don't think Caleb Williams under pressure. Caleb Williams is pressured more than any other quarterback because their line is weird and everything else. And, his numbers under pressure are not great. That's the only thing. My only reservation with him, because he can sling it. He resembles Mahomes a lot in his mannerisms and everything else. So you don't want to pass on him just for that reason. But under pressure, it's a whole different story. And you have that sample size with him.
Yeah. To your point, Bill, I think when we miss drafting on these quarterbacks, so much of it is about just like what team and system you're drafted into. Like, who's your quarterback coach? Who's your you're getting Andy Reid, you're getting Kyle Shanahan, or you're getting the Jets. It's and like Jalen Hurts. If he goes somewhere else, is he Jalen Hurts that we know now? Maybe, probably not though. And so I think again, like a lot of these guys, like if he goes to the Bears, we were talking. Could Caleb say, "Hey, I actually don't want to go there"? Like, could he pull an Eli Manning and just say, "No, I'm going to pass"? Or because he could always come back to school too. And now with the NIL stuff, like these guys could make money. It's not like they're going to be, that maybe they might not make like whatever an NFL rookie's going to make, but they'll make close to it. So who knows? Like they have that chip too.
It would seem like one quality would be there's some sort of competitive gene that these guys have or don't have. Like I heard Lombardi last week on his podcast was talking about Zach Wilson, about that. He just didn't feel like Zach Wilson had the competitive intensity for a 3-hour football game, that he had the, desire or intent to just dominate that some of these great guys have, like the best guys. And I think this is the same way in basketball. These guys that it's not even just about the sport they're playing, but they're on the playing cards. They're playing Scrabble, on the fucking bus. Like anything they're doing, they're trying to win. And I think Burrow's like that. But like last year, you would have said Bryce Young was like that. And then you watch him on Carolina, he's a shell of himself. So is that the offensive line's fault? Is that Frank Reich? He's throwing to Adam Thielen. Like to me, the Bryce Young thing screws it up more than anything because he's in the worst possible situation. And we have no idea if he's good or not.